What if the most powerful man in the room was the one everyone chose to ignore? That question hangs in the air the moment the old man steps into the ER, leaning heavily on his cane, his breathing shallow, his eyes tired but alert. At first glance, he looks like exactly what the system is trained to overlook: elderly, quiet, alone. No family rushing beside him, no urgency in his voice. Just another non-priority case in a crowded emergency room that smells of disinfectant and impatience. The fluorescent lights hum overhead as he waits at the intake desk. His hands tremble slightly as he explains his pain, choosing his words carefully, almost apologetically. The nurse barely, "I'm not sure if this is serious," he says softly, as if afraid of being a burden. The nurse barely looks up. Her eyes scan the computer, not his face. She types, nods once, and gestures toward the waiting area without a word of reassurance. Time stretches. Minutes blur into an hour. Then 2. Around him, younger, patients are called in. Complaints louder than his, demands sharper. He watches stretchers roll past, hears doctors laugh down the hall, feels the dull ache in his chest grow heavier. Still, he waits. Silent, patient, disciplined in a way that feels almost out of place here. There's something about him that doesn't fit the picture, though no one notices it yet. The way he sits perfectly upright despite the pain. The way his eyes follow every movement in the room, alert, calculating. The way he never once complains, never raises his voice, never asks to be seen sooner. It's as if he's learned long ago that authority doesn't beg, it endures. A young resident finally approaches, glances at the chart, and sighs. "Vitals are stable," he mutters to a colleague, loud enough for the old man to hear. "Probably just anxiety. We'll get to him later." The words land harder than any diagnosis. Anxiety. As if decades of lived experience, discipline, and sacrifice could be dismissed with a lazy assumption. The old man closes his eyes for a moment. Not in defeat, in control. Inside his jacket pocket, something small and metallic presses against his chest. A reminder of who he was, of what he survived, of the rank he once carried without ever needing to announce it. No one in that ER knows it yet, but they are standing on the edge of a mistake that will expose everything wrong with how they see power, respect, and worth. And the longer they keep him waiting, the more irreversible that mistake becomes. If this moment already made you feel that quiet anger rising, that sense that something isn't right, pause for a second and engage with this story. Stories like this matter because they expose how easily dignity is ignored when we stop truly seeing people. Let me know in the comments what you think was the real mistake the hospital made here. Was it negligence, arrogance, or simple lack of respect? If you're starting to understand where this story is going, make sure you leave a like. It tells the algorithm that stories about honor, justice, and hidden strength deserve to be shared. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now so you don't miss stories that remind us why respect is earned through character, not appearances. The waiting room begins to feel smaller as the hours pass, not because it fills up, but because the old man's presence seems to shrink in the eyes of those responsible for helping him. A nurse walks by and nearly bumps his cane, muttering an apology that sounds more like annoyance than regret. Another staff member laughs softly with a colleague, casting a glance in his direction as if he were part of the furniture, something old, inconvenient, and easily ignored. When his name is finally called, it's mispronounced. He corrects it calmly, without irritation, but the nurse waves it off. "You know who I mean," she says, already turning away. That small dismissal lands heavier than the pain in his chest. Names matter. Identity matters, and in that moment, his is treated as optional. Inside the exam room, the tone doesn't improve. A doctor skims his chart without meeting his eyes. Questions are rushed, answers are interrupted. When the old man tries to explain how long the pain has lasted, the doctor cuts him off. "At your age, aches are normal," he says flatly. "We'll run a few basic tests when we can." When we can. not when we should. The word age hangs in the air like a verdict, not a fact, but a judgment. To them, age means weakness, slowness, irrelevance. No one asks about his past. No one asks what he did before retirement, what his life demanded of his body, or what discipline taught him to endure silently. They see wrinkles and assume fragility. They hear a calm voice and assume exaggeration. As he waits again, alone, forgotten, the old man overhears a conversation through the thin curtain. "He's probably fine," a voice says. "Another old guy who doesn't want to be alone." The assumption is casual, almost lazy, and yet it reveals something darker. How easily respect disappears when society decides someone no longer has value. Still, he doesn't protest. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't demand attention. Instead, he watches. He listens. He remembers places where mistakes like this didn't just cost dignity, but lives. Places where underestimating a quiet man had consequences no one could undo. The tension grows because something feels off. Not just medically, but morally. The system is failing right in front of us, and the people responsible don't even realize it yet. But somewhere in this hospital, a thread has already been pulled. And once it tightens, everything is about to change. By now, the neglect no longer feels accidental. It feels systematic. The old man has been moved from one chair to another, then back again, as if his presence needs to be managed rather than helped. Each transfer comes with a sigh, a look, a reminder that he is taking up space someone else might deserve more. The pain in his chest tightens, not sharply, but steadily, like a warning he has learned not to ignore. A different doctor enters, younger this time, confident in the careless way that comes from believing protocols replace judgment. He asks the same questions, flips through the same chart, reaches the same shallow conclusion. "You're stable," he says, already stepping toward the door. "We'll observe." No timeline, no explanation. Just delay disguised as caution. The old man nods, always polite, always contained. But something changes in his eyes, not fear, recognition. He has seen this before, in other institutions, under different uniforms. The pattern is familiar. When responsibility becomes diluted, accountability disappears. Everyone assumes someone else will act. And so, no one does. Across the room, a nurse argues loudly with a patient half his age, promising immediate attention. The contrast is impossible to ignore. Louder voices move, faster here. Anger is rewarded, silence is punished. The old man understands that lesson instantly, yet chooses not to break his composure. He was trained for situations where composure meant survival. As the hours drag on, the injustice compounds. His blood pressure spikes unnoticed. A test result sits unread in the system. A junior nurse hesitates, glances at his file twice, then decides not to escalate. Someone else will catch it, she tells herself. That quiet rationalization may be the most dangerous thing in the room. From the outside, it still looks like nothing is happening. But emotionally, everything is building. For the man, for the system, and for the viewer who can sense the approaching collision. This isn't just about medical neglect anymore. It's about what happens when institutions forget that respect is not optional, especially when someone is too dignified to demand it. And somewhere beyond the ER walls, a connection exists that hasn't been made yet. A name that carries weight. A past that commands attention. A truth that, once revealed, will turn this calm negligence into panic. It happens quietly, almost invisibly, the way the most important shifts always do. A junior nurse, newer than the rest, pauses longer than she should while scrolling through the old man's digital chart. At first, she's just double-checking a medication dosage. Then her eyes stop moving. She scrolls back up, down again. Her brow tightens, not in confusion, but in disbelief. There's a designation buried deep in the file, half hidden among outdated records and transferred systems. Not a diagnosis, not a prescription. A notation from decades ago that doesn't belong in a civilian hospital record. She assumes it's a glitch, an error carried over from another database. But curiosity wins. She clicks. Her posture changes instantly. Across the room, the old man notices. He has learned to read micro-movements, shoulders stiffening, breathing shifting, eyes darting toward exits. The nurse looks at him now, really looks at him for the first time, as if trying to reconcile the frail figure in front of her with the words glowing on her screen. She leaves without a word. Minutes later, a phone rings at the station. Low voices follow. Then another call. The mood in the ER subtly shifts. Laughter fades. Conversations shorten. A charge nurse frowns at the monitor, then looks toward the old man's room with a trace of unease she can't explain. Inside, the old man sits, perfectly still. He doesn't reach into his pocket. He doesn't make a call. He doesn't announce anything. He never needed to. His entire life, authority came not from speaking first, but from knowing when silence would do the work for him. A doctor enters, this time slower, more deliberate. He asks a question he should have asked hours ago. "Sir, can you confirm your full name?" The old man does. Clearly. Calmly. The doctor swallows, nods once, and leaves again, this time closing the door, carefully behind him. Outside, a supervisor is now standing at the desk. Then another. Whispers turn into clipped sentences. Someone mentions a base. Someone else mentions a rank, quickly corrected to former rank, though the distinction suddenly feels meaningless. The tension thickens, not with anger, but with anticipation. The system senses it has misjudged someone important, even if it doesn't yet understand how badly. Somewhere, a call has been placed that cannot be undone. And whatever answer comes on the other end will not be quiet. The automatic doors at the far end of the ER slide open with a sound no one notices at first. Conversations are already hushed, tension already high, but when the man who steps inside takes 3 measured steps forward, something shifts on a deeper level. It's not his uniform alone that changes the air, though the dark fabric, the insignia, the unmistakable bearing make people straighten without realizing why. It's the way he moves, controlled, certain, unhurried, the kind of presence that doesn't need permission. A nurse at the desk stops mid-sentence. A doctor lowers his clipboard. Someone whispers a word that shouldn't carry weight in a civilian hospital, yet somehow does. "General." The man scans the room once, his eyes sharp, assessing in seconds what others missed for hours. He doesn't ask for directions. He already knows where he's going. Staff instinctively step aside as he walks, creating a clear path without being told. No raised voice, no announcement, just authority revealing itself through silence. He stops outside the old man's room. Inside, the old man hears the change before he sees it. The footsteps are familiar, the rhythm, the discipline. He closes his eyes briefly, not in relief, but in acknowledgement. When the door opens, the general stands at attention for a fraction of a second. A gesture so subtle most people miss it, but one that carries decades of meaning. "Sir," the general says quietly. The room goes still. Doctors freeze, nurses stare. Someone near the doorway instinctively straightens their posture, heart racing as realization crashes down. This isn't a courtesy visit. This is recognition. And it exposes the magnitude of the mistake that has just been made. The general turns, his expression controlled but cold, and asks a single question that lands like a verdict. Why wasn't he treated immediately? No one answers. Because suddenly, every excuse sounds weak. Every assumption sounds reckless. Every moment of neglect now has a witness who understands discipline, responsibility, and consequences better than anyone in the building. And in that suffocating silence, the hospital finally understands. They didn't ignore a harmless old man. They underestimated someone whose past commands respect, whether they like it or not. The transformation is immediate and impossible to hide. What was once casual indifference turns into rigid formality in a matter of seconds. Doctors, who barely glanced at the old man earlier, now stand straighter, choosing their words carefully. Nurses who sighed at his presence avoid eye contact, suddenly aware that every past gesture is being replayed in their minds, measured, judged. The general doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. His silence applies more pressure than shouting ever could. He listens as explanations stumble out, fragmented phrases about high volume, triage protocols, and staff shortages. Each excuse sounds thinner than the last. He lets them finish, then looks at the monitors himself. He notices the unread test results, the delayed response, the missed warning signs, details others dismissed, but he recognizes instantly as failure. Behind him, the old man remains seated, hands folded, expression unreadable. He does not gloat. He does not seek revenge. That restraint speaks louder than anger ever could. This is a man who has seen real chaos, real consequences, and knows that dignity is not proven by humiliation, but by composure. A senior physician steps forward, voice tight. "We weren't informed of his background." The general's reply is calm, almost clinical. His background was never the issue. His condition was. That sentence lands hard, because it strips away every justification. It exposes the uncomfortable truth. Respect should not be conditional. Care should not depend on status. And yet, here they are, only acting correctly now that authority has entered the room. Orders are given, immediate tests, priority transfer, specialists summoned. The urgency that should have existed hours ago floods the space all at once. But it feels different now. Too late to undo what already happened. Too late to erase the silence, the waiting, the quiet dismissal. Around them, the atmosphere has shifted from confidence to restraint. No one speaks unless spoken to. Every movement is careful. The power dynamic has flipped, and everyone knows it. The hospital is no longer in control of the narrative. And as the old man is finally prepared for proper care, the weight of the moment settles in. This was never just about medicine. It was about how easily society forgets honor when it hides behind appearances. The room is quiet now, but it's not the peaceful kind of quiet. It's heavy, reflective, the kind of silence that forces people to confront themselves. As the old man is gently prepared for transfer, no one rushes him. Every movement is deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if the staff finally understands they are in the presence of something they failed to recognize earlier: earned authority. The general stands nearby, not overseeing, not interfering, just watching. His role is complete. The system has corrected itself, but the cost of that correction hangs in the air. Doctors avoid meeting his eyes. Nurses speak in hushed tones. The confidence they carried hours ago has been replaced by awareness of how thin the line is between professionalism and prejudice. Before leaving, the old man looks around the room one last time. He doesn't lecture. He doesn't remind anyone who he was or what he did. He simply nods, a small gesture filled with meaning. A reminder that true strength doesn't demand recognition. It exposes those who fail to give it. That nod does more than any reprimand could, because it leaves everyone with the same realization. They didn't change because it was right. They changed because they were forced to see. And for the viewer, the lesson settles deeply. Never confuse silence with weakness, never mistake age for irrelevance, and never assume you understand someone's worth based on what's visible on the surface. Some legacies are quiet, some power is hidden, but respect, once denied, always finds a way to return, often when it hurts the most. If you stayed until the end of this story, you already understand why it matters. Moments like this remind us that respect isn't optional, and dignity should never depend on appearances. If this story made you think differently, subscribe to the channel now. It's how you make sure stories about honor, justice, and hidden strength keep reaching the people who need them. Before you go, leave a comment saying, "Respect is earned in silence," so I know you watched until the very end. And if this story resonated with you, hit the like button. It helps more than you realize. Now don't stop here. The next story appearing on your screen carries an even deeper lesson about never underestimating the quietest person in the room. Click it now and keep watching.